Hi, and welcome to Spooky Hours. My name's David Saunderson, and today we're talking to author John West. He's recently published a book called Britain's Haunted Heritage, and we were very interested to read that. We did an interview with him a couple of months, I'm going to say not online, but a written interview with him, and I thought we'd ask him back because there's a lot of cases in that book that I found fascinating. And the one we're going to talk to him today is about the Roman soldier ghosts in York. How are you, John?
Oh, I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Are you coping with the lockdown?
Yeah, I'm fine. I mean, my routine, I do a lot from home anyway, work-wise and that writing, so it hasn't really changed that much, and I still go out for my daily walk and everything. The only real difference is having to queue at the supermarket, and I haven't seen my girlfriend for a bit, but apart from that, it's business as usual,
It
really.
is. It is. So when I asked you about when I asked about the book, and I thought, what was the one thing that you'd like to talk about? You said the Roman soldiers. That's a big sort of a trope, I'd say, in sort of any kind of ghost lore where you have fields where battles might have taken place in the past and seeing ghostly legionnaires. Can you tell us about what happened in York that led to these ghosts?
Yeah, well, what it is, York's a Roman foundation. It was founded in the first century by the Ninth Legion, who later mysteriously vanished. There's a lot of stories about they went into the north, what is now Scotland, and they were defeated there. And the Emperor Hadrian came over and built a wall because of it. But no one really knows what happened to them. And Rosemary Sutcliffe did a very famous book called The Eagle of the Ninth, which gives a fictional account of what happened. But I always was fascinated with that. And then when I heard that ghosts of Roman soldiers have been seen in York, I did a bit more research, and what it was is a chap called Harry Martindale. He sadly passed away probably a couple of years ago now, and he was working in York in I think it was February 1953, and he was 18 years old, and he was an apprentice plumber, and they said they needed a new heating system installed in a building called the Treasurer's House. Well, that's a medieval building near the Minster, and it was used by the treasurers of the Minster. And it was actually built on part of the site of the old Roman fortress. And he didn't know this, but in the cellar, archaeologists had been digging and had exposed part of the Roman road. Yeah, I think it's called the Via Decumania. And he went down there anyway, and he was working on the first day, and he saw this pit exposed in the Roman road. But as I say, he didn't know that that was actually part of the original Roman floor level. And anyway, he was working on the ceiling. Nothing happened on the first day, and then on the second day, he was hammering away on the wall, and it was probably about lunchtime, and he heard a blast of like a trumpet coming from somewhere above him, it seemed. And he thought, oh, it's probably someone in the house. Because, I should add, the Treasurer's House was given to the National Trust in the 1930s, so it was open to the public. Before then, it was a private residence. And anyway, he heard this note, and he thought it was a radio or a gramophone, and he took no notice. And then all of a sudden, out of the wall below him, because he was on a ladder, probably about 4 or 5 runs up, this figure came out of the wall, totally solid, a Roman soldier holding like a trumpet, but like the old-fashioned trumpet, not the modern type, but a
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
long-handled one. And he couldn't believe it. Now, the thing was, the figure was totally solid, but you could only see it from the knee up until it reached the level of the Roman road, and then he could see all of it. And you can imagine he was obviously terrified.
yeah.
And then straight after it, a horse came out of the wall with an officer, a Roman officer, on the back of it. And the thing that struck him, it didn't look like a stallion, like you see the old Hollywood movies and that, and the horses are sort of, proud stallions riding off into battle.
Yeah,
This was like a cart. This was like a cart horse,
yeah.
and again, totally solid. And then this passed through, and then he was followed by a line of at least 20 Roman soldiers marching. I think it was two abreast, and again, totally solid. And he was struck, because by the fact that they looked real, because he'd read ghost stories and they were always like wispy and see-through, and these were nothing like ghosts as he
Yeah.
imagined them. And he fell off his ladder in fear, and he backed up into the corner of the cellar because he was terrified. What if they see me? What are they going to do to me?
Mm.
And but they showed no inclination to look at him. They didn't seem to even be aware that he was there, or that they were marching through a
Yeah.
cellar. He could hear them murmuring as well, but he couldn't make out what they were saying. Obviously, it would have been in Latin anyway. But and this went on for some time, and then the last Roman soldier marched through the other side of the cellar, and that was his opportunity to basically leg it upstairs, because as I think anyone would. And he bumped into one of the people in charge of the treasurer's house, and the
Yeah.
chap said to him, "Oh, by the look of you, you've seen the Roman soldiers." Well, Harry Martindale wasn't too pleased about this, and he basically swore at him and said, "Well, if you knew that those were down there, why on earth didn't you tell me?" And
Yeah.
he left, and he refused to go back. And he even went to the doctors, and there's a doctor's record of him going there, and the doctor took him off work because he was suffering from shock.
Mm.
And he never went back. And he kept quiet about it, though, for many, many years, because as I said, this was February 1953. And then in the 1970s, he told people about it, and it broke in the press. And he came clean and said, yes, this happened. And incidentally, when he revealed what had happened, he was working as a police officer in the Minster, because it's a bit of a bizarre thing, but they've got their own police force.
Yeah.
And I think it started in the 19th century when someone tried to burn down the Minster. But anyway,
Okay.
he was a serving police officer. And it all came out in the press, and it was in magazines. He was interviewed on the telly. It was in the papers. I think it was even featured in the Arthur C. Clarke series as well, Mysterious World.
Okay.
And he went down there. And Richard Felix interviewed him as well many years later. But anyway, the archaeologists tried to sort of throw him about what he'd seen, because I should go into a bit of a description about the actual uniforms of the Roman soldiers. The ones he'd seen, they had round shields, leather tunics, green skirts, and they were unshaven. And they looked ill, weary, nothing like the sort of classic Hollywood sort of Charlton Heston Roman soldier, you know, square jaw, clean shaven, red tunics and rectangular. And they said, no, that's nothing like what Roman soldiers look like. And he said, no, this is what I saw. You know, they had green tunics, round shields. And they did a lot of research. And then they found out that, yeah, Roman soldiers in the later empire did look like that. So that threw them a bit. And also there was another theory that they might have been perhaps even from an earlier period of the Roman Empire, connected with the Ninth Legion that vanished, as I said before. And that they were auxiliaries, and basically auxiliaries didn't have the same uniforms as regular Roman soldiers. They would have different coloured tunics and different shields and that. So we're not too sure what type of Roman soldier he saw. But the interesting thing is that after he came out with this, it emerged that a lady called Joan Mawson in 1957 in the treasurer's house. She'd actually lived there with a daughter. On 3 separate occasions, she'd seen the same Roman soldiers, exactly the same looking, wary, unshaven, you know, the same type of uniform. And even her daughter had heard a trumpet blast once. And the first time she'd seen him, she'd become alerted to him because her 2 Yorkshire Terriers went crazy. And then they went through the wall. But she also saw him in the corridors as well, which was weird. And in the 1920s, there was a sighting as well. This again later came out. When it was a private house, there was a fancy dress party there, and a lady went wandering around the house on her own, and she saw this Roman soldier, and he barred away from going down the corridor and held out a spear. And she was pretty miffed by this because he didn't answer or anything. And she went back to complain to one of the organisers, and she said, you know, who on earth was that rude man dressed as a Roman soldier who wouldn't let me pass? What right's he got to do that? And they said, there isn't any Roman soldiers here, you know, anyone dressed as a Roman soldier. And they searched the house and couldn't find anyone. So those are the other stories. But since the 50s, the ghosts haven't been seen at all. Now, the thing was, they did alter the cellar later on and change the ceiling. And no doubt you're aware of the stone tape theory.
Yeah.
And I often find that when a building is altered, it either increases the activity or decreases it or even erases it. And my theory is that these Roman soldiers were recording, and that the Roman road being exposed perhaps activated that recording, or Harry working on the cellar activated him, or he was psychically inclined as that lady was. And it was just being replayed. They weren't there. It was like, you know, watching a DVD with Charlton Heston or Clint Eastwood on your telly. They're not there. They're not aware you're looking at them. But it was constantly being replayed for some reason. And then the alterations erased it. But you can actually go to the treasurer's house now, and they'll take you down in the cellar, because for years they couldn't, because it was health and safety, because I think there was like a asbestos down there or something. But that's all gone now, and you can actually see the Roman road, and they'll tell you about the Roman soldier ghosts. And I went there and I found it fascinating, because I'd always wanted to visit the area, the haunting, and see the road. I didn't feel anything, and I did actually ask one of the guides, has anything been seen since the 50s? And she said no. She said some people get a feeling that there's something around, but of course that could be just because they know the place is haunted and are expecting to feel something. But yeah, I really find that a fascinating case. And there's also the Roman Baths in York, which is under a pub called the Roman Bath.
Yeah.
And people have seen a Roman soldier down there as well. And he's been seen in recent times. And they've also heard splashing and that as well, as if the baths are being used. And they were legionary baths used by the Roman soldiers. So even if the Roman soldier goes to the treasurer's house are gone, at least there's one hanging around the baths.
How do these compare with other sort of battlefield sites or areas within Britain that have sort of, what we call sort of Roman legionnaires? Have you done any research into those?
I have. There's not that many stories of Roman soldiers actually. When you check the records, there's one in Essex that's supposed to appear on a burial mound, and he's like a Roman centurion. In Lincoln, in Balgate, which again is a Roman fortress, and it was later a town. People have heard marching soldiers, but there again, that could be from any period. The English Civil War, affected that area, and there were soldiers in the town. There's marching soldiers have been heard in St Albans, which is a Roman foundation, but again, they've never been seen, so that could be any period. It could be, like I said, English Civil War soldiers. So there's not that many Roman soldier ghosts on record. Even places like Hadrian's Wall, where you'd expect there to be loads, all the ruined forts and mile castles and everything. And I haven't found a single case at all. And even like sort of battlefield sites like Maiden Castle, which I think it was the Second Legion under the General Vespasian, who became a Roman emperor later on. He stormed that, and no one's seen anything there either. So they're very few and far between, actually, Roman soldier ghosts. But later battles, there's lots of stories, especially English Civil War, like Marston Moor, Naseby, things like that. But yeah, very few Roman soldiers have been seen. York's probably the most famous.
So, I mean, when you're talking sort of Roman ghosts, they're pretty old ghosts, aren't they? You think about it, like you always talk about you never see a caveman, you never see a caveman ghost. So, I mean, a Roman centurion would be pretty much as old as anyone's going to see a ghost here. That's right, isn't it?
I think the earliest ghost story that I can find in this country, and it was an archaeologist, and he saw a Bronze Age horseman because he recognised the look of the man on the horse with the weapons and everything, and he was seen riding into a burial mound. This was an archaeologist, so which someone's not likely to sort of make it up, because it wouldn't do his academic career.
No.
That's the earliest, so from the Bronze Age. But apart from that, then it would be the Romans. And then it seems to be from the medieval period onwards, the ghosts. Again, is it the stone tape theory?
Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Because, I mean, you'd wear out after a while, wouldn't it? Any kind of energies would no longer be there after 2,000 years. That's what
it would. Anyway. Well, Elliot O'Donnell is a very famous author of ghost stories, and if you're fan of ghosts and that, get some of his books. They're available online, a lot of reprints now, because I think they're in the public domain, a lot of them. He had a theory that he actually preempted the stone tape theory, because he felt that ghosts perhaps lasted 50 years or so, and then were really strong apparitions, and then they start to gradually fade away. And there was a case, Peter Underwood, again, another famous author of ghost stories and that. I can't remember the name of the house, but it was a woman in red that was seen haunting this building. And then down the century, she became a woman in pink, a woman in white. Then she was only heard. And then there was nothing. And again, it was like literally just like you're constantly playing a record, and eventually it's going to wear out and you can't play it anymore. So I think there's a valid point. I don't think all ghosts are recordings, because there's ones on record where they interact with someone, they come back to right a wrong or speak to someone to reassure them they're okay. And obviously they're not recordings, but I do think that I wouldn't like to say a percentage, but a lot of ghost stories are just that, literally recordings that have been printed themselves in the fabric of a building, the soil, or even a tree. And whatever it is, whether you're sensitive to that or whether it's the atmosphere, and occasionally it's just replayed back.
That's all the time we've got today, John. I'd like to get you back because we were going to talk about Jack the Ripper ghosts, and I think
Certainly.
that deserves its own video. So you take care, and we'll get in touch, and we'll do this again maybe next week, and we'll talk some
Brilliant.
more. Okay, good. Thank you.
Very much.